Just had to take a breath there because I have to tell you, I am very angry. You know, I'm going to try and be coherent in this video, not just rant, but I am very angry and I want to vacuum this a little bit. I'm going to talk specifically in this video about Britain's largest newspaper, The Sun. Anyone who will have seen some of my early videos and who looks at my channel from going from the beginning up to now will have at least some idea that I'm no fan of British tabloids. But in recent days, I've just been thinking just how poisonous the sun really is. Um, what I would like to do in this video is actually take on directly some of the excuses that are made for it. After I made my video about Katie Hopkins, most of the comments were supportive, and I could tell that most people who replied um, could understand where I was coming from, because a lot of people feel this way about what she said. But there was one guy who made some excuses for her, and he was doing it in the context of free speech. Now, it's to people like him I want to address this video. Well, the video's for anyone, but I want to start by talking about Katie Hopkins, then the Sun in general. And I do apologise if I'm repeating, but I really need to get this off my chest. By the way, today the UN Human Rights Commissioner um, mentioned this directly. Saeed Rad Al Hussein said that the comments by Katie Hopkins were similar to language used before the Rwandan genocide. Now, he's not the first person to point that out. I believe there was one or two MPs pointed that fact out, and it is true. Um, because the word cockroach was used um, to describe Tutsis by Hutu extremists during the Rwandan genocide, and it was a code word. It was an actual specific code word used to hunt down Tutsis on perceived visual differences and so on. It got neighbours to inform on each other, and we know what happened there. The worst genocide of modern times. Now, obviously, we're not going to have a Rwanda sort of genocide in the United Kingdom. That wouldn't be, that it's not going to happen because the vast majority of people do not think the way she does. But there is a disturbing number of people, though, who still support her and still make excuses for her. A lot of the excuses come down to the free speech thing. Now, I really want to tackle this because I think it is something that we often cite that as one of our principal values in this country. And I have long been a staunch supporter of freedom of expression for anyone. Um, but I do think that if you're a public figure, you have responsibility. Like Katie Hopkins, whether we like it or not, is a public figure. I don't think she deserves to be, but she is. She's famous, she's well known, she's a public figure. She's a columnist for a national newspaper. Now, what she said in that article was so disgusting and so extreme that it really crosses any rational sort of line of responsible debate. And I think that people who say, oh, what about her freedom of speech, really are being either willfully ignorant or astonishingly naive to think that what she is saying doesn't have an implication. I'm at risk here of coming across as snobby, but I don't care because this has to be said. There is a more important issue, quite frankly. And what I'm going to say is that, frankly, there are a lot of Sun readers, not everyone, but there are a lot of Sun readers who will read that article and agree with her. And that, quite frankly, says a lot about Sun readers, at least those Sun readers. You know, I'm not going to be overly diplomatic in this. I'm going to be blunt. People who support Katie Hopkins, as far as I'm concerned, are part of the problem. They're as bad as her. And I have to say, I find it hard to keep my cool with the sort of logic that would even attempt to defend what she said, because this is not harmless words. Um, Whatever you think the solution to that situation is, the Mediterranean migrant situation, whatever you think the solution is, um, for her to use that sort of language in a position of power is utterly despicable. And let's not kid ourselves, she is in a position of power. By being a columnist, and one of the country's best known columnists in the country's most widely circulated newspaper, is a position of power. Now, the thing about Katie Hopkins' attitude is, if it had come from someone who was maybe going through, let's see, some sort of economic destitution, or they were genuinely ignorant because they didn't have resources for knowledge, or they, you could think, well, okay, it's a terrible view, but that would be the explanation. But let's be clear, Katie Hopkins is a very privileged person. She's a wealthy businesswoman. We're not talking here about the average sort of person who would be taken in by far right parties because they're angry and they're bitter and they want to take it out on someone else. The thing I think is particularly worrying about this is that Katie Hopkins knows damn well what she is saying is inflammatory. I don't know. I don't know if she has conviction or not. I think possibly she does, and that is worrying. Either way, it's bad. I shouldn't really believe it, but she was just saying it for attention. It would still be disgraceful. But the fact she possibly believes it, this is, I have to be honest. I never hit women, but with someone like Katie Hopkins, when I see her gloating, smug face, when I see that, I really, my blood boils, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who feels that way. I hate her. I absolutely hate her. And I know she doesn't care. I know it makes no difference to her. But what the hell? I'm just expressing my thoughts here. I hate that woman. I hate her more than I have ever hated. I wouldn't say any person, any woman. There's plenty of male, high-profile men I hate as well. Is hate a good thing? No, it's not. But I'm being honest. I hate her. I absolutely hate her. And I think people like her are the absolute slime of humanity, quite frankly. Now, I'm not calling for violence against her. I'm not calling for that. But what we're seeing here is quite, it's hard to fathom really how the tabloid press can think it is okay to give her a column with the sort of extreme ideas that she came out with. Now, what the UN representative was saying was the European governments need to do more to tackle the sort of extreme racism and xenophobia that does exist. And he was particularly looking at the British tabloid press. I can understand why. I also think there's another aspect to this because, Britain often preaches about the importance of free expression, and that is a very important thing, it is. But the problem is, people in countries that have limited free speech will look at something like this and say, oh, look, that's what happens when you have free speech. Fanatics like Katie Hopkins get to have their view. So they will look at it as, if that's the example they're getting, then it's not going to do a lot for that argument. But what I have argued here is it's not so much about the fact that she has such a despicable opinion. What I am arguing about is the platform that she is being given. That is the issue here. That really is the issue here. Because people have those sort of extreme views up and down the country every day. And although that's unpleasant, it's not potentially dangerous, not in the same way. But when you have a rag like the Sun pumping that out, there are some very naive people in this country who will believe it and believe and be taken in by that sort of language, and they will start to think the same way. I really do believe that. That is why the outrage and the anger is entirely justified. Why? Because it is a human response to something that is unacceptable. Because if you have any human decency whatsoever, you see these people drowning in the Mediterranean, and you would have to be made of stone not to have some human response to that. I mean, I can't even comprehend someone who's so desensitized that they can't bring themselves to even feel an ounce of human compassion for that situation. Now, tonight there's been a big earthquake in Nepal. I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to see if she opens her mouth on that one, because if she does, it would be. And the thing is, it isn't the first time she's come out with something like this. A few years ago, she was talking about the life expectancy in some parts of inner city Scotland, and she was saying that's one way for them to avoid working to get their pensions. So again, she just, this is a woman who does not know the meaning of diplomacy at all. And the thing is, this is not about political correctness, and let's not pretend it is, because what she is saying is not, it's not sort of like she's speaking the truth and she's doing it in a blunt way. What she's saying is fanatical. It's not level-headed, you know. We're not talking sort of Nigel Farage style blunt talking. This is extreme talking. I mean, this woman is she's actually she herself is a fanatic, right? But she is actually symbolic of a bigger problem, and that is the sun. Now, I know I made a video about this, but this is where I want to talk about the sun generally. And I sincerely believe, and I want to explain this. I sincerely believe the single biggest threat to this country today is possibly the tabloid press. I really am tempted to think that might be the case. Why? Because in my view, they hijack democracy to an extent that is unfathomable. I mean, if you don't like the Conservative government, or if you don't like the Labour Party, or whatever, that's fine, and you could have valid reasons for that. But I believe actually in Britain the media is more powerful than any politician. So in that sense, the real problem does lie in the worst aspects of the media, and the tabloid press are, in my view, the worst aspects of the media. I really do believe that. Now, is there a place for it? Of course there is. Yeah, there are times that they will tackle issues that wouldn't necessarily be given attention if they didn't tackle them. I get that. But the Sun specifically, apart from its criminal background, let's think about this for a second. It's owned by Rupert Murdoch, a man who owns 34% of the British media. Now, compared to some other countries, that might not seem like a lot. But for a democracy, that is a serious problem, because 34% is 34% too much. That's over a third of the entire British media owned by one man. And I really, really wish he would get the hell out of this country and take his slimy rags with him. I exclude the Times from that. I know the Times is owned by News Corp, but the Times is bigger than Murdoch. Um, Apparently, he's ordered his editors to step up the smear campaign against Ed Miliband. Now, I'm not a massive fan of the Labour Party. I don't agree with everything they stand for, but whatever way you look at it, that is not that cannot be seen as democratic. That a multi-billionaire media tycoon can order his tabloid cronies to smear a democratically elected politician. I mean, this election has to be for the British people, not for tabloid editors. And if there's any left-wing equivalent going on against David Cameron, I would say the same thing. But the point is, there is not the same level of power from any individual, any left-wing individual that can be comparable. That's why I am focusing on Murdoch. If you present to me a left-wing tycoon who ordered left-wing editors to launch a smear campaign against David Cameron, I would be saying the same thing. Either way, it threatens democracy. Their style of journalism is, and the thing is, the only way really to tackle them is like this, making videos and having rants. I went onto their channel, and I'm going to say this. I went onto their channel. I sent them several angry messages. Now, is that going to change anything at the Sun? No, probably not. And I have the choice not to buy it. But really, I'm a Joe Average. What can I do against a powerful media conglomerate like News Corp except speak out and be candid and be honest? But what I hate most about them is about the tabloid press is that they really, really do have a shacklehold on democracy. For the last 30 years, no prime minister has been elected in this country without the help of the Sun, without the endorsement of the Sun, let's say. That's disgraceful that any single newspaper can have that level of power. It's disgraceful. Now they will of course say, well, we're legitimate because people continue to buy us. And yeah, that is true, right? People buy the Sun, it makes them legitimate. But I just wish some readers would really, really think about this. I don't believe all some readers are bigots. I don't believe all some readers think in the same way as the poison behind it. But you do need to understand that it isn't harmless. It isn't harmless. Just look at history. Look at the influence that extreme propaganda has had on history. And then consider what is happening in this country. In the United Kingdom, we're going to have serious social economic questions over the next few decades. Now, the good news, I want to have some glimmer of optimism in this. The good news is that sales in the Sun have decreased since the 80s. That's a good thing. I would never call for the Sun to be banned outright because I recognize tabloids have their purpose, but I am still adamant that it has way too much power. And the thing is, there's an extreme arrogance about this, and that arrogance has never really gone away, even post phone hacking. They believe that they're above criticism. They believe that they hide behind freedom of the press as an excuse whenever they're scrutinized. And we really, really, really need to examine the role they have on British democracy. Because I would argue it is overwhelmingly negative. Now, there's some things that the tabloids come out with. I'm focusing on the Sun, but I not much time for any tabloid. There's some things that they come out with that, okay, can't really argue against. If if there's a serious crime that's taken place and a granny is being mugged in a terrible way, yeah, of course you're going to agree that when they say Fug gets arrested for this, you know, you'd be pretty daft not to. So it's not, just to be clear here, I am not saying that I disagree with every single word that they print. I'm not saying that they're wrong about everything. What I take issue with is the massive level of distortion and the excess power that they have. That is something I find hard to stomach, quite frankly. That is the issue here. I've never said that the Sun lies about everything. I've never said that they're wrong about everything, although they do have a record of dishonesty. But of years and years of trash coming from that paper, allowing Katie Hopkins to have that genocidal run might just be the worst thing they have ever done. And that would, although Hillsborough, their lies about Hillsborough could well be up there as well. But this just basically I'm just having a rant here. That's it. I just want to get this off my chest. I Sometimes I get so angry that I can't really think clearly, and I need to get it off my chest because I just think it's unacceptable. David Dinsmore is really the real problem here because as editor he makes the final decision on these things. And as far as I'm concerned, he has proven in the last few weeks that he is a man without a soul, without any human decency whatsoever. Because if he had any human decency, he would just have an ounce of comprehension at just how deep people feel about this issue. Even the majority of Sun fans, from what I have seen, have not, supported her in droves. No, they simply don't care. They simply do not care. I will always defend people's right to have a controversial opinion, but there is controversial and then there is fanatical. And what she said was fanatical. This is not about left, right, or center. You know, it's healthy to have debate. It's healthy to have different points of view. And I hate political correctness as well. You know, I don't like constant self-censorship and people always watching the words. So I'm not talking here about people being super sensitive and not saying controversial things. But really, anyone who cannot see what was wrong with what she said um, really needs to wake up.